Hi,
Okay.
welcome to this kickoff edition of RiSE, the podcast. It is the weekly podcast, and we intend to grow it into radio shows and live events and learning programs. And the goal is to bring positive change to the world. This podcast will defend the small business owner. And as we all know, as small business owners, and you're about to hear our guest today share her journey, small business owners have really been hit hard over the past 16 to 17 months.
Yeah.
And so we're going to defend the small business owner. We're going to encourage creativity, new ideas, problem solving, independent critical thinking, finding a new path and a way with passion, and of course, some blood, sweat, and tears to make it all happen. Each week, we're going to feature guests who are making a difference for good, whether it's how we do business, leading at work, making communities stronger, eradicating poverty, or touting abundance, or new ways to heal and be healthy, or empowering youth to be all they can be, and learning from our elders. This show is a journey of ideas and solutions and new thinking that has vision written all over it, a vision of who and where we all want to be and where we want to be going. So our first guest, well, what happens when life gives you lemons? You make lemonade, right? We have all heard that expression, but what happens if there's no recipe to make that lemonade? It could be trial by fire or error by error, or it could be the best alternate plan that could possibly happen. So we welcome our first guest. Her name is Galina Burston. And Galina, let me tell you, she is with us on the screen, received her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine in 2009 from the Ontario Veterinary College in Canada after an 11-year career as a registered veterinary technician. She continued on to the Qi Institute of Traditional Chinese Veterinary Medicine, and we're probably more aware of that kind of treatment with Reiki and those sort of healing modalities. So she studied at the Qi Institute in Florida and became a certified veterinary acupuncturist and certified veterinary food therapist in 2012, while still progressing towards the herbal practitioner certification. Galina obtained 20 years of experience as a veterinary technician and then a locum veterinarian at companion animal, equine, emergency, and exotic practices in Canada, the US, and the UK before opening up her own holistic practice in Ontario, focusing on acupuncture, food therapy, aromatherapy, as well as integrative medicine for pets and animals. Along with years of clinical experience in different roles and branches of veterinary practice, Galina's unique practical approach to medicine focuses on holistic principles in practice. She's also an avid scuba diver, certified dive master, a singer-songwriter. Oh, well, we got to get to this thing after. An artist, and pre-COVID spiritual world traveler, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. She currently lives in Costa Rica, continuing to practice acupuncture, food therapy, and natural medicine with domestic species at a local wildlife. Soon she'll be offering continuing ed courses and wellness retreats to the veterinary professionals through Pure Vita Vet Wellness. Okay, I got it. .thinkific.com, as well as acupressure certification for pet owners and pet professionals. You're going online like a lot of us are these days. So welcome. Nice to have you, Galina.
Thanks for having me.
A joy. We're
your first guest.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You're a kickoff guest today. And like many of us, you know, in North America, or the world for that matter, you know, when life on the planet changed mid-March 2020, things we knew, did, or worked changed with it. And this is really what happened to Galina. Her life, as she knew, changed dramatically. A nice holistic veterinary practice dried up immediately. And as the owner of the business and the building it was housed in, Galina didn't have many options. So what options did you choose in the spring of 2020?
Well, I chose not to be a slave to the bank. That was number one. I saw literally, like my life flash before my eyes. I was 3 years into the business. It was just starting to, well, be profitable. And I just really needed another year. And it would have been solid, like completely solid. But as it was, I had to decide, uh, what to do with the business itself, whether to try and suffer through and keep it. And realistically, I would have been sort of trapped in that scenario for possibly another 10 years because of the way that the banks had set up. They had their their assistance plans that really weren't assisting anybody as far as I could tell, because businesses like mine were just too small. I applied for these various funding options and was basically told no. So I realized, well, I guess it's not an option to stay open. And so I had to think of plan B, which was always sort of, I guess, in the back of my mind. I guess, like most of us, we sort of think about, what we want to do for retirement purposes, where we want to be eventually, because where is your business actually going to put you in 10 to 20 years? So my plan was always to be in Costa Rica at some point. So I guess what happened with COVID is I had to decide, do I just drop everything and go now? Or do I try and, struggle through and play out everybody's, typical retirement plan? You work for so many odd years, you build it up, you sell it to someone, you keep the cash, you put it into all your usual stuff like property, RSPs, all that. And I said, you know what? No, no, because the instability that we saw with COVID made me also think, gosh, I don't know, life's too short.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that. So this was a bit of what we call a spring uprising, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. And I think a lot of people kind of realized with the whole COVID situation, like, wow, all of a sudden the government can just shut you down, like you can't let anybody in the doors. Well, that was the first thing that happened, right? Everybody was shut down because nobody knew what was happening. We didn't know how dangerous it was. We didn't know anything at that point. So yeah, literally, I think so many people were in the same boat that we didn't know what to do. Like, how long is this going to last?
Yeah. And when did you decide that you were going to sort of extricate yourself from the business and you own the property and then make that move to Costa Rica where you are now?
Well, I think I got so frustrated with the banks because nobody was helping me. There was supposed to be all this help. My loans to actually purchase the building and start the business were government guaranteed loans, yet nobody was actually helping me on the government side either. I was just kind of left, in the wind, so to speak. So, and I like all that, like with so many other people, my lease on the car, like I had a leased vehicle, all of these things were coming up. I'm like, well, what the heck am I going to do? So I thought the only asset that I had was the building. Thankfully, I wasn't renting. When where I had the office, I had the apartment upstairs. So I had sort of, I set myself up with minimal expenses when I started the business, with the intention of, paying everything off in the first 5 years. And then it was, free and clear and great. So thankfully I did have the business that the building was invested in basically. So I was able to sell that in the middle of COVID. Unfortunately, at that point in time, property prices had taken a slight dip. So, anyways, it was what it was. I managed to, take the money out of that. And then I had to decide, okay, now what? Now what do I do? And then all of a sudden things just sort of fell into place. I thought, well, what's stopping me from going to Costa Rica now? I mean, obviously my life has exploded here. So I can either, put all the pieces back together slowly and surely, and be kind of miserable. Let's face it. I was living in my parents' basement for like 3 months.
Wow.
After I sold the property, I had nowhere to go. So I was like, okay, well, now where do I go? I have to go back to my parents' basement.
So how did you deal with that loss and those changes? But from an emotional and personal point of view, because
Oh, it was absolutely devastating. Absolutely devastating. I literally saw my life flash before my eyes, and I thought, my gosh, all this money I've invested. I used my own personal line of credit for the business that I also saw flash before my eyes, because I'm like, okay, well, I'm never getting that back. And it was, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I just went, okay, well, I mean, I got to think of something drastic to do, because this is not going to be an easy rebuild if I have to rebuild. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen with the government loans, and whether I was going to be, literally in so much debt at the end of this that it would take so long to crawl out that I'd be retired by the time I actually got out. So I thought, you know what? No, this is the time. This is almost like the universe telling me, okay, you have to start again, and you got to think of something else. So I sort of looked at my skill set. I looked at all the things that I've done in my life. And then I really sat down and thought, where do I want to be for the next pandemic? Or war, or I don't know. There's always something. So, and I thought, you know what? Yep, I'm just going to take my retirement plans and just go. I'm just going to.
And did you have that inner belief that you'd get through these changes somehow? Like, what was your inner dialogue like? Because like, that's a big change, like, I'm going to sell it all and just go, and I'm going to cash in and sell and go off to a new country in a new life.
And believe me, I had a lot of attachments, my friends, my family. I can't even practice as a veterinarian clinically here in Costa Rica. I don't know Spanish. Well, now I know Spanish, but I didn't know Spanish. And it was a completely different culture, completely different part of the world. I wasn't sure how long I'd be stuck out of Canada. And in fact, I just thought, you know what? I was an immigrant once. I have skills. I'm not a stupid person. I've rebuilt a million times. I can do this again. And maybe this is the push that I needed to actually live my life the way that I always wanted to. Cool. Because realistically, I mean, you get one shot at this, so you better like what you're doing, and you better like where you are.
Yeah. So if you were to coach someone today, Galina, somebody watching or listening, what would you advise them in terms of having a belief that they can recreate, possibility in their life? They can, make something from nothing, or make a lemonade that is actually sweet and refreshing. How would you coach someone else?
I think I don't know. The only thing you can control in this world is you can't control anything, really. It's a false sense of security. Everything is a false sense of security. The only thing you can truly control is how you react to a situation. You can't control the situation itself, but you can control how you deal with it, how you internalize it, and how you basically live your life after it. So instead of the negative self-talk is always the easiest, right? That's just, for some reason, our society conditions us this way. I don't know why, but this is a fact, unfortunately. But if you can sit there and say, look, I have this skill, I have this skill, I have this type of support. You know what? If I really had to start again, what would I want to do? And then you go for it, because really, when you're in that type of position, you don't really have a choice. You can, there's two options. You can either give up and die, basically, right? Because that's really the the option. Because if you're not engaging in life, you're not doing anything, you're in essence dead, right? That's it.
Yeah.
So you can, and if that's not an option, if you sit there and you think, okay, I can wallow in this self-pity, I can wallow in this situation and this negativity, but really, okay, fine. What's the end result? I'm not going to kill myself, right? I'm not going to kill myself. Or do I rebuild? Do I look at, this is my opportunity to actually do something that I want to do? Maybe fix something, maybe change something, maybe adjust it. Because if I'm not if suicide is not an option, and believe me, for most people, it's not,
Well,
no
this
matter
year
how
it
bad
was, this past year it was for a lot of people, so.
yes, and believe me, I've been there. I was actually diagnosed with clinical depression before even all the COVID stuff started. Anxiety and depression, actually. And it just, I don't know, it just all of a sudden it clicked. Like, this is my reaction. I can change my reaction. I can look at it as an opportunity versus an ending. Yeah, sure, it's an ending. Every ending is also a beginning. So why not look at it that way? Because giving up is not really an option. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
What are you gonna do?
you got to carry on, right?
Yes.
My
And
mom was a war bride from England, and the thing was, chin up, let's go, carry on, right?
yeah,
And they did, So
absolutely.
so for those watching or listening to us today, you're now living in Costa Rica. You made this big move from Toronto to there. You're working still with animals on a wildlife resort. How did it? How did the pieces sort of come together? I mean, what were the steps you took to take you from Toronto business just died because people weren't coming in to see you? We were on lockdown in
Yes.
mid-March until May. The uncertainty of everything. They say if you're going to make a big change, they say, it's like eating an elephant, right? Not recommended because you work with animals. But you eat an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. So that being said, what were the steps you took from Toronto and lockdown or this uncertainty to building your own home, which we're getting a nice tour of,
Oh, yeah.
and from plans, like you built that from scratch, and
Yeah.
living and working where you are now?
Well, like I said, it almost kind of fell into place. I think I spoke with you about this before at a different conversation, but I had this weird feeling back in the fall before any of that started. Because I had been
2019 or fall 2020?
fall of 2020.
Oh, okay. So this is really still within the year. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, wait, was it 2020? Oh, now see all my, it's hard to figure out what day it is here. So let alone what year, but yeah. It was the fall before, like COVID was March 2020, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, it was the fall of 2019.
Okay.
I had a trip over, like I had a family trip planned to Costa Rica in January. And that fall, I had this really intense feeling like, okay, I'm going to apply for my residency. I don't know why. I wasn't ready to apply for my residency. I wasn't ready to move. I was planning on it within, the next 5 to 10 years. So I thought, okay. But for some reason, I had this horrible feeling that I needed to do it. It was now or never. That's it. So I went through all that process, went on my family trip at the end of January to Costa Rica, put in my application for the residency, went home to Canada at the end of February, and then March hit and COVID stopped everything. And I went, oh, that's why I had the feeling to go get my residency.
Wow. So another less, like I was going to ask you, well, continue on. I want to hear, because then I
was going to say, I think gut instinct plays a huge, huge thing in a lot of these changes, because if I didn't know to listen to that, there's no way I would have been able to even, like, I wouldn't have been here at all, period. So I think a lot of people really discount that, like, oh, it's not anything. This is just something I feel like, it's not really anything. Why am I listening to that? Don't worry about it. But sometimes when you listen to it, you realize 6 months down the line, oh, that's why. That's why my instinct told me to do this, because it's such a powerful thing that I don't think we listen to it enough, because I mean, really all it is, it's your brain assimilating all this extra information that we don't consciously process. That's all it really is. So you actually know more than you think you know about everything. Right. So thankfully I was able to do that. And then, so it was an option to come to Costa Rica once COVID hit and all the borders were closed. And of course there's no flights. The only way I was able to get back into Costa Rica is because I had a residency in process.
And that was January of this year.
It was actually last July. It was right when
Oh,
everything was shut right down.
wow.
Yeah. So, and now they've, kind of changed everything. It's harder to get in. It's hard. You can't even apply for residency now because there's such a backlog. It's, yeah, it was literally a blessing in disguise that all of that happened.
So, even the residency, like, it all worked out for you. It was like, it was almost like preordained, really, wasn't it? Like,
It's a very strange
you,
feeling. Yeah.
your initial residency was under what condition? And now you're under a data, um, like a data business or an online business specialist condition?
Well, I never changed so my residency is for temporary residency. And actually I should have been approved about a month ago, but again, everything's backlogged right now. So, which actually ended up being a blessing in disguise too, because they just put in a new law that we're waiting for it to actually go, on paper that new residents can bring over, 2 vehicles, household items without any duties, which is really nice. It saves a lot of money and makes it feasible to do that. Yeah, a lot of stuff is still in my parents' basement, unfortunately. I literally
right in the basement,
right.
Yeah.
I brought 2 suitcases and a tote full of medical supplies. That's all I came to Costa Rica with. That's it.
Wow.
And one suitcase was actually more medical supplies.
But then you built this house from plans. When did that happen?
And so it was really interesting. It was almost like, yeah, like the universe blew up everything I knew and thought I was going to do with my life. And then it said, but here's this other path if you so choose to take it. So if you want to go this route, this is how you go. And it's almost like I did one step and then another step opened up. Right. So it's just a matter of deciding and going, and then these like opportunities tend to almost create themselves, right, as long as you're engaging and actually open to those possibilities. So I came here and the wildlife center was closed. They had no volunteers, they had no medical supplies, like everything was shut. So here I am, I show up with my suitcase of medical supplies, my tote full of equipment. So I helped them out. They gave me a place to stay in the meantime. Obviously, because, I did feel like a bit of a refugee, I'll be honest, when you first get here. Very discombobulating. It felt like the end of the world at the time, right? So all of a sudden, I'm halfway across the world with, without my friends and family, living in like the jungle, basically. But you know what? It also taught me a lot about myself too. And I realized, I have more skills and more guts than I thought I did, right? Because it's almost like necessity. It's like the generations before us, living through world wars. Like, we don't know anything like that. This is our world war,
It is. It is. Well, that was my next question, is like, what 3 lessons have you learned over this journey? What were the 3 biggest lessons? So you just mentioned one, you've got the skills. You kind of mentioned another, and that's to listen to your gut, and act on it. Any other lessons that you want to maybe share with our people tuning in today?
Well, I think it's about also your expectations and maybe opening your mind about, because, everyone has their idea of what, how they see themselves in 20 years or how they see their life going or the path that they want to do, professionally and personally, whatever. But perhaps there's other options that we can't imagine that might be better. That's all.
Yeah.
So perhaps not closing yourself, like it's not do or die. It's, well, maybe it's this and maybe it could also be this, or maybe it could be a mix of the two, So really it's about, and I think this is where the intuition sort of plays in with it, is recognizing the opportunities when they come along, because a lot of people don't see them as opportunities. They say it, oh, well, it could be this or it could be that, but it really is an opportunity. This could be something that, expands exponentially on itself. So so it's exploring other skills. Maybe it's something online. Maybe it's something, I don't know, maybe it's something you do with your hands. Maybe it's an opportunity to like make a hobby into something. I don't know. I honestly didn't think I was going to be doing online teaching, but I met and this is the thing, it's about engaging, right? So I met a lady down here that used to do corporate training for these big companies in the States. So she says, well, you know what? I'm bored. I haven't done anything for a year and my husband's working all the time. Why don't I help you write these courses? So it was just a matter of, having a margarita with somebody new in the neighborhood.
It all comes down to the margarita.
Right.
Wow.
Well,
And,
sometimes it
and,
helps.
and you're, so now, one of the things you really also had to get over were fears and doubts. What were some of the fears and doubts that got in your way, or that you had to slay, really? What were the
Well, I
fears and
think it helped in my situation, the fact that I literally lost everything. Right. So it was literally, I had nothing left to lose. So I had to really start with a clean slate. I'm like, okay, well, I could live in my parents' basement, and I actually had locum work I could have done. I had a couple colleagues that had practices in the Niagara area that were more than happy to just pay me a locum rate, and I could have worked no problem. But I don't know, it almost felt like I was going backwards. Like this was sort of the opportunity to really redefine my life. And instead of complaining about all the things that I didn't like before, I could be like, you know what, I can actually build something completely new and completely different and completely the way that I wanted it to be. So I guess I don't know, I had the two options, either, be down in the dumps and be completely depressed and that's it. But I'm 47. I got some time left. There's still opportunities there. And yeah, maybe the opportunities are not where you think they are. So I had to really just look at my life and be like, okay, I got nothing to lose. I might as well do this.
I love it. I love it. We're with Galena Burston, and she is at her home office in Costa Rica, where she's working, living, and you're also in love, right? So
Yes, that was
and
another funny thing that happened once I got here. It was
that's amazing.
right. It was like, and it's funny because, I've been single most of my life by choice. I've had, a couple long-term relationships, fine, but I've never been married, and I never really, I had no plans to ever really get married. But about a month after I got to Costa Rica, it was the weirdest thing. It was, I literally met my soulmate, and I'm like, oh, you're here. And he says, oh, you're here. He was stuck in Costa Rica with the whole, for the year before that, unfortunately with his situation, he came to Costa Rica with a family, and his wife kind of left him here, took the kids back to the States. So he also had to rebuild his whole life and decide, am I going to do the same old and just rebuild? Or do I take this as an opportunity to do something completely different that perhaps is actually more of what I need,
Now, I want you to make our friends in Toronto a little jealous, if we haven't already, or anybody else. How much did you build your home for? Because this is amazing.
So one of the perks of getting to, this country in the middle of COVID with everything closed was I was able to get a very good price for a property by the beach. Because of course nobody was buying at the time and nobody was building at the time. So I got a local builder who's my neighbor actually. So he's built my house now, and he's building my parents' house. They're coming this winter, also on the property, and we're putting in a pool. But basically, for about 100,000, I got the property and the house built. The one house.
Yeah, I told you I'm getting my application in now. I'll wait. Now we're almost done here, but for someone connecting with us on RiSE today, what do they need to do to embrace possibility thinking? Because you are all about anything's possible. I'm open. So how do they embrace possibility thinking to connect to making big change, dreams, or goals happen?
I think a lot of the time you limit yourself because you don't even know that you're doing it. So, you see this, I don't know, this opportunity, like say, yeah, gee, I can go live in Costa Rica for the rest of my life and not worry about even coming back to Canada, if I don't want to. And the first thought is, no, that's crazy. Why, how could I do that? Like, that's ridiculous. And you start going through all the reasons why you can't. Right? That's the first thing anybody ever does, I know. So it's really about catching yourself when you do that and say, but why do I think that way? Like, why is it an automatic no? Why is the first answer always no? Why can't the first answer be yes? And then you look at it that way. And then, I mean, it still might not be the right decision. I mean, but if you look at it just from that different angle, all of a sudden there's more possibilities. And it's almost like you open up your own creative mind as to those possibilities, right?
Yeah. I study improv, and one of the big things in improv, the lessons is you want to yes and someone else. Yes and, right? So where do you go from here, Galina? What do you see the next year bringing you?
Well, I'm hoping that I'll have the full, like all the courses basically done in the next year. And up and running. So I'm running into a few just small logistic technical difficulties, like who do I use as a videographer, that sort of thing. So we're working that out slowly. So I'd like to say 6 months, but realistically, I'm looking at a year as that goal.
And it does take time. So good.
Absolutely. At this point, I'm doing a little of this, a little of that. To be honest, I looked at this as a real opportunity for myself to explore more of my artistic side. Before I was a vet, all through high school, I never took any sciences, believe it or not. I remember in grade 9, my home economics teacher told me I was too dumb to do science, and it stuck, right? Like somebody makes a comment like that, and all of a sudden it sort of defines you for the next, 10 years. So, it was really quite amazing that I even decided to go back to school and do all my sciences just so I could be a veterinarian, which is a very scientific profession. But I'd always leaned more towards the art side of things. So I've used the time here to do more of the songwriting. I do weddings with my fiance actually at a local resort. So I do macrame. We trade services here a lot of the time. So I do some acupuncture. I do the coursework. Another friend I've met here, he's actually, he's a brilliant man. He's a corporate lawyer from New York City, and he needed to change his life as well. So he ended up here, but he's on all these, corporate boards of different companies. He's into cryptocurrency. So anyways, there's a fund for one of his companies that they want to fund local conservation and wildlife. So he's asked me to be like an executive director for the fund. So that's going to be coming up in the next year. So I never thought, one of my job descriptions would be, an NGO executive director, but there you go. I'm going to have to learn a lot about that job as I go. But I think, maybe I never saw myself doing that, but perhaps I do have the skills to do it. If there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah. Oh, I just love it. And you mentioned the label that your teacher put on you, and Penny Alexiak, the Canadian Olympic medalist and swimmer, she commented on Twitter about her teacher in school, saying swimming, maybe not, and,
you're right.
Yeah, and she's got the most medals of any Canadian athlete.
Yeah.
So
take that as a challenge. That's what I say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you think so?
Yeah,
just
I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not in a negative way. It's just like if you follow what you just said today, you follow your intuition. If you're open to the new and possible, if you're not closed off, if you don't sort of bemoan your fate, like, oh, poor me, I lost, everything. And you took steps to go forward. You overcame your fear, and on the other side of fear are miracles. So
yes,
this is a great story. For our watchers, viewers, listeners, where do we reach you to work with you, Galina, or just to connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So all of that's sort of in process at the moment. I'm actually changing the website a little bit. Anyways, it's not really up and it was up and running and now I had to take it down a little bit to work on it. So probably the Facebook. Facebook is the easiest and probably email as well.
Okay.
Um,
And I'll put it in the links once we post this, but it's
Sure.
facebook.com holistic animal doctor,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
will find you. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
you're and then info at pure vitavetwellness.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's probably the easiest. So yeah, so I mean, I hope I can be an inspiration to some people listening. That would be great because I think, especially these times, you have to get rid of that negative thought processes and don't let anybody tell you you can't do anything
Yeah.
because you know what, you have to ask them, you ask them like, who are you to tell me that,
Exactly. When did they become expert in moving to
Exactly.
Costa Rica? I
Exactly.
I want to thank you so much for this today. It was really a joy. That was Galina Burston, and she joined us from her home, as you can see, now in Costa Rica, used to be in Toronto and London, Ontario. Thank you for being part of the RiSE podcast. Our goal for those watching and listening is to inspire individuals like you watching and listening to rise up, inspire, make impact, be socially aware, and continue the entrepreneurial spirit to make life in the world a better place to live in. Next week, we're going to welcome Pat Linnell. He's the author of the book Grace Bomb. It's about sharing love, one person at a time, with good, loving deeds. And he talks about how we can embody kindness, caring, and love each day in a very creative and practical ways. Until then, I'm your host, David Cohen. And until next week, rise